Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. And today we're heading over to Taiwan, to a place that I'm sure many of you have at least heard of, even if you haven't been there yourself. Longshan Temple in Taipei.
Yeah, Longshan Temple.
Mhm.
It's a really fascinating place. Not just beautiful, architecturally and all that,
Oh yeah,
but also such a hub of activity. So much happening there, culturally and religiously.
right, right. And it's one of those places that just draws tourists, right? I mean, if you're going to Taipei, you're probably gonna end up at Longshan Temple at some point.
Absolutely.
Uh,
It's a must-see for sure. And that's actually what got us so interested in this particular research study.
Yeah, this is cool. So they actually looked at how tourists experience Longshan Temple. Not just, the pretty pictures and the Instagram moments, but what they actually do there, how they move around, and I think really importantly, how the information that's available, or maybe not available, shapes that whole experience.
Yeah, the information piece is huge.
Mhm.
Like, are people getting what they need to really connect with this place? Or are they just kind of, passing through, taking a few pictures and moving on?
That's exactly what this study kind of gets at, the whole idea of what they call a passing glance and shallow experience. And, it's kind of sad, right? Because this place is so rich with history and tradition. You could spend days there and still not see it all.
Right? And Taiwan is seeing a surge in tourism, which is great, but it also makes you wonder if, with more people coming through, are they missing out on a deeper understanding of places like Longshan Temple?
Okay, so let's get into the study itself. What did they actually do?
So in this first stage, the researchers, they went really old school. They just observed tourists. I mean, they literally just watched what people were doing. They followed 50 foreign tourists as they made their way through the temple, tracking their movements, how much time they spend in each area, all that.
So, like fly on the wall stuff.
Exactly, exactly. Just trying to get a sense of that baseline experience, how people naturally interacted with the temple.
And what they find, I mean, first off, how long did people even stay at the temple?
Okay, so get this. The average visit was just 24 minutes and 18 seconds.
Wait, 24 minutes? That's it? I mean, I get that people are busy and maybe they've got a packed itinerary, but 24 minutes for a place like Longshan Temple seems kind of rushed, doesn't it?
It does, and they broke it down even further, looking at where those 24 minutes were spent. And the longest average stay was in Area B, which is the front hall where the main entrance is, the incense and candle shops, all that. People spent a little over 8 minutes there. Then came Area E, that's the rear hall with all the different shrines. And after that, Area A, which is the plaza out front.
Okay, so it makes sense that the front hall and the area with all the shrines would be the most popular, right? People probably want to see the main deities and, you know, light some incense, make a wish, all that.
Right. Then, after those areas came Area C, that's the central hall. Then Area D, the front hall with the covered walkway, the cloister. And last was Area F, which is basically the outdoor space on the grounds.
Okay, so a pretty clear hierarchy of where people were drawn to. But I'm curious, what about how people moved around? Did they see any patterns in the way people navigated the temple?
They did, actually. So in Area A, the plaza, not surprisingly, there was a lot of, well, just congestion. A lot of people stopping to take pictures, kind of getting in each other's way.
Yeah, picture that, everyone trying to get that perfect shot.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Then in Area B, the front hall, the researchers saw a lot of back and forth movement, people kind of going this way and that, trying to figure out where to get incense, it seemed like.
Ah, okay. So maybe the layout wasn't super intuitive or the signage wasn't clear.
Yeah, could be. And it created a bit of a traffic jam, especially around that area where you buy the incense and candles. Then in Area D, the front hall with the cloister, things were much more, well, just smooth. People moved through in a pretty consistent flow.
Probably because it's a more defined space, right? Like you
Right.
can really only go one way.
Yeah, that makes sense. But then over in Area E, the rear hall with all the shrines, they saw this interesting counterclockwise movement, a lot of people circling around, and some definite confusion.
Especially, I bet, around Yulao Hall. That's the one dedicated to the matchmaking deity, right? People go there to pro for love and all that's super popular.
It is. And they often try to find the red thread, which is supposed to, tie you to your soulmate or something like that. So yeah, lots of people looking around there.
Okay, so they've got this picture of how people are moving, where they're going, how long they're staying. What about the information piece? Did they look at how people were using the maps, the signs, the brochures, all that?
They did, and this is where it gets interesting. The numbers were shockingly low. Only 8% of the tourists they observed actually used the navigation maps that were posted.
8%. Wow. That's really low. I mean, you'd think more people would be looking at those, especially if they're feeling lost or confused.
Right. But get this. The maps on the right side of the entrance were practically hidden by an ATM.
No way! An ATM! Seriously?
Seriously. So just bad placement, like a simple design flaw, was actually blocking crucial information for visitors. Then the guidance signs, they did a little better. About 10% of people used those.
Still pretty low, though.
Yeah, and the researchers noted that they were often placed too low, so they got kind of lost in the crowds, or they were blocked by, people stopping to look at something else.
So again, just practical design issues getting in the way. What about the brochures? Did anyone even pick those up?
16% used the brochures,
Hmm.
so better than the maps. But still, less than 1 in 5 tourists were even bothering with the official information.
Okay, those numbers are seriously making me question if those materials were even helpful, you know? Like, were they clear enough? Was the information presented in a way that actually makes sense to people?
Yeah, good question. And here's another kicker. Just trying to find their way around, figure out where to go, what to do, all that wayfinding stuff that took up almost 15% of the total visit time.
Wow. So almost 4 minutes of your precious 24 minutes at Longshan Temple is spent feeling lost and confused.
Pretty much. And the researchers specifically noted that Area B, right when you walk in, that's where they saw the most looking around, the most asking for directions, the most people trying to make sense of the maps and signs. So not a great first impression, right?
No, not at all. Kind of sets you up for a frustrating experience if you're constantly second guessing yourself and feeling like you're missing something.
Exactly. But they did see that for certain practices like drawing fortune sticks or using those divination blocks, people would pull out their guidebooks or their phones.
Ah, okay. So maybe that's where they were getting more specific instructions.
Could be. And in Area C, that brightly lit central hall, the main activity was just looking around, taking in the architecture.
So again, maybe a missed opportunity to provide some context, like what are people looking at? What's the significance of this particular deity or that piece of art?
Good point. Now, one of the most interesting things they found was about the difference between people who participated in worship and those who didn't. The average visit for people who actually worshiped was over 26 minutes,
Okay, so longer than the overall average.
and much longer, while those who didn't worship stayed for just under 17 minutes.
Interesting. So it seems like engaging in those rituals, really taking part in the religious aspect, leads to a more immersive, longer experience.
Exactly. And here's the thing that I think is most important for, anyone listening who might work at a cultural site or anything like that. Over 27% of the visitors didn't even try to worship because they couldn't find incense.
Wait, they couldn't find incense? Like it wasn't clear where to buy it?
Seems like it. And that's a
Huh.
huge barrier, right? I mean, if you're coming to a temple, chances are you're at least somewhat interested in participating in those rituals.
Yeah, it's like going to a concert and not being able to find the entrance to the venue.
Right. You're there, but you can't actually engage in the core experience. And they also found that people who did worship were much more likely to buy souvenirs.
Ah, okay. So there's a practical implication here, too. If you can make the experience more accessible, people are more likely to connect with the place and, spend a little money to take a piece of it home with them.
Exactly. But here's the thing that really blew me away. Not a single one of the 39 foreign tourists who actually got incense performed the full worship correctly.
Really? None of them.
None. And they mostly got tripped up by the order of the halls, like which one to go to first, then second, and so on.
So they knew they needed to burn incense, but they didn't know where to burn it or in what order.
Pretty much. And the study found a very specific reason for this. The existing maps and brochures only showed where the incense burners were.
Okay, but not like a step-by-step guide to the whole process.
Nope. They didn't show the sequence of halls, the intended flow of people, or the full steps of the worship. So people had some pieces of the puzzle, but not the whole picture.
Wow. That's pretty big oversight. I mean, you're basically setting people up for failure. No wonder they were confused.
Right. And they also noticed that tourists would often hesitate at turning points in those well-lit areas where you have to decide which way to go.
Like, they're not sure if they're on the right track.
Exactly. And that unclear location of the incense shop, that just added to the confusion with people doubling back and, just generally feeling lost.
Okay, so this first stage paints a pretty clear picture. The existing wayfinding system at Longshan Temple is just not doing its job. People are confused, they're spending a lot of time just trying to figure things out, and even those who want to participate in the rituals are getting it wrong.
Yeah, the researchers summed it up perfectly. There were numerous problems with the worship information. So that's stage one. They've identified the problem. Now, what do they do about it?
Right, because that's the key question, isn't it? Okay, so what's next in this research journey? What did they do in stage 2?
So in stage two, they got a little more experimental. They set up simulation, basically a mock worship experience. They brought in 30 people who had never been to Longshan Temple before and asked them to go through the steps, holding the incense, lighting the candles, using the divination blocks, drawing fortune sticks, all of it.
Okay, so kind of a controlled environment where they could really see where people were getting tripped up.
Exactly. And guess what? The findings from this simulation lined up perfectly with what they'd observed in the real temple. The participants in the simulation struggled with the exact same things, knowing where to go and how to do it correctly.
So it wasn't just that the tourists they observed were, maybe distracted or not paying attention. There was a genuine issue with the information itself.
Right, right. And just like those tourists, the simulation participants ended up relying heavily on asking the volunteers or other worshipers for help.
Which again emphasizes how inadequate the existing guidance was.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that same Area B, the front hall, continued to be a bottleneck. Lots of people going back and forth between the candle and incense shops and the burners, trying to figure out the sequence of things.
Yeah, it seems like that area was just a major point of confusion. So, did this simulation provide any new insights into what information people were actually looking for?
It did. They asked the participants to rank how important different types of worship information were to them. And the top priority, by far, was the significance and process of worship with incense.
So, people wanted to understand not just what to do, but why they were doing it, the meaning behind the ritual.
Exactly. And after that came information about fortune sticks, the correct order of worship, how to use the divination blocks, introductions to the different deities, and info about the candles. The things that were ranked least important were historical stories and temple art.
That's really interesting. So, while those aspects are definitely important, it seems like first-time visitors, at least those who were interested in participating in the worship, were really focused on the practicalities of the experience itself. Like, how do I do this? What does it mean?
Exactly. They were there to participate, not necessarily to get a history lesson. And that's a really important takeaway for anyone involved in tourism, right? Understanding what information visitors actually prioritize can make a huge difference in how you design your materials.
Absolutely. Okay, so stage two confirms that there's a real problem with the information, and it also gives them some insights into what kind of information visitors are actually looking for. So, what do they do with all this knowledge?
They put it to good use. Stage 3 was all about redesigning the tourist brochure and then testing to see if it actually improved the visitor experience.
Okay, so they took what they learned from watching tourists and from the simulation, and they said, okay, let's make a better brochure. Tell me about this new brochure. What did they change?
Well, first off, they made it bigger. The unfolded brochure was 39 by 21 centimeters, but it folded down into 5 sections, so it wasn't too cumbersome to carry around. They chose a light khaki color, which kind of blended in with the temple's outer walls.
Okay, so aesthetically, it was fitting with the surroundings. What about the content?
The content was really focused on making the worship process crystal clear. So they included very detailed steps for each action: lighting candles, burning incense, using the divination blocks, getting the red thread, drawing fortune sticks, all of it. They had a whole section on the guidance on worship order, basically a step-by-step guide to which hall to visit first and second, and so on.
Okay, so that addresses one of the biggest problems they identified, right? People not knowing the correct sequence.
Exactly. And they included a floor plan with 3D illustrations so people could easily see where the different deities were located. They had information about other facilities like restrooms and all that. They had introductions to the deities themselves, and then finally sections on the temple's art and historical stories.
Okay, so they didn't completely neglect those aspects, but they definitely prioritized the practical how-to information.
Yeah, based on what they learned from the participants, that made sense. So they've got this new brochure. How do they know if it actually works?
Right, that's the million-dollar question. So how did they test it?
They brought in another group of 16 people who had never been to Longshan Temple before, just like in the simulation, and they asked them to go through the whole worship process using only the new brochure as their guide.
So no asking for help, no looking at other resources, just the brochure.
Exactly. And afterward, they had them fill out questionnaires, and they even asked them to draw maps from memory to see how well they understood the layout.
Okay, drum roll, please. What were the results?
The results were seriously impressive. The accuracy rates for performing the individual actions were super high. Divination blocks and getting the red thread, 100% success rate. Worshipping with incense and drawing fortune sticks, both just under 94%.
Wow, so people were actually able to do the things correctly.
They were. But the most amazing result was in following the correct worship order. 93.75% of the participants did it perfectly. Candles, then incense, then divination blocks, than fortune sticks.
That's a huge difference from the first stage where no one got it right.
Right. It shows that by providing clear, step-by-step instructions, you can dramatically improve people's understanding and their ability to actually engage in the experience.
Absolutely. What about the flow of people? Did the new brochure help with that congestion and confusion they saw before?
It did. They observed a much smoother flow overall as people used the brochure to navigate. So less bumping into each other, less backtracking, less general chaos.
I'm curious, how are people actually using the brochure as they went through the different steps? Like, were they constantly referring to it, or did they just glance at it once and then go?
It varied depending on the action. For lighting candles, a lot of people looked at the section on the worship order and the detailed instructions, often checking it multiple times. When it came to burning incense, they tended to read while they were walking, which, the researchers noted, could still have some impact on the flow of people.
Yeah, you can picture someone walking along, head down in the brochure, or maybe not paying attention to where they're going.
Right. But every single person did refer to the worship order for the incense. For the divination blocks, most people looked at the worship order to find the right location and figure out what to do, and they usually stopped in one spot to read. And a lot of them also looked at the instructions for this ceremony itself.
So they were really trying to understand both the where and the how.
Yeah, they were engaged. For the red thread, it seems like the information about that was initially missed by most people.
Maybe because it's a little bit more hidden.
Could be. And then for the fortune sticks, once they had located the divination blocks, they generally knew where to go, and they usually read the worship order after they received their numbered stick.
So it sounds like that worship order section was really crucial, especially for those initial steps, like the candles and incense.
Yeah, it gave them that framework, that sense of how the whole process flowed. And the detailed instructions were more helpful once people knew where they were for things like the divination blocks and fortune sticks.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the map? Did people use that much?
Interestingly, not really. And the participants said that because the worship order was so clearly marked on the floor plan, they could understand the layout well enough without needing to consult a separate map.
So just by following those steps, they were able to orient themselves.
Exactly. And remember all that time people were spending just looking around, trying to figure things out? That decreased significantly with the new brochure.
I bet. So how much did it go down?
For candles, it went from about 14 seconds down to just over 4 seconds. For incense, from almost 12 seconds to under 3 seconds. For divination blocks, from 2 seconds to just over 1 second. And for fortune sticks, from 3.5 seconds to under 2 seconds.
Those are huge improvements. And it's not just about saving time, right? It's about people feeling more confident, more engaged, less frustrated.
Absolutely. And perhaps the most telling statistic is this. In stage 2, 25 out of 30 people started by worshiping with incense first, which is incorrect.
Yeah, they were just going straight for what they thought was the main thing.
Right. But with the new brochure, only one person made that mistake.
Wow, that's a dramatic difference.
It really is. The researchers concluded that the accuracy rates for all the key worship behaviors were above 80% with the new brochure.
Okay, so clear evidence that a well-designed brochure focused on the visitor's actual experience can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. And they even connected this back to how tourists feel, pointing out that getting lost or feeling confused can lead to anxiety and make people less likely to want to return.
Yeah, that makes sense. You want people to leave with a positive impression, not feeling like they just wasted their time wandering around.
Right. So clear guidance isn't just about improving the experience in the moment. It can have long-term benefits for the site itself. The study's conclusion was that the new brochure effectively guided worship action, which was exactly what they set out to do.
Awesome. So, big takeaway for everyone listening. Good information design matters.
It really does. And what this study shows is that focusing on the actual experience someone is trying to have, in this case, participating in the worship at Longshan Temple, can significantly enhance their understanding and engagement. It's not just about providing information. It's about providing the right information in the right way.
Totally. It
Mhm.
makes me think about all those passing glance experiences we talked about earlier. This study gives a concrete example of how to go beyond that superficial level and enable a much deeper, richer, and more meaningful experience for visitors.
Yeah, it's about moving beyond the checklist of sites to see and really facilitating a genuine connection with the place.
Absolutely. And it highlights the importance of understanding what visitors actually do, what they need, what they prioritize.
Hmm.
Like the fact that first-time worshipers at Longshan Temple were more interested in the practical how-to information than the historical background is a really valuable insight. You have to
Yeah.
meet people where they are, right?
Right. And this ties into that whole idea of the experience economy, doesn't it? Where it's not just about seeing things, but about actively doing things, creating memories, participating in something bigger than yourself.
Exactly. And as we saw, even something as seemingly simple as making it easier for people to participate in the religious rituals at Longshan Temple had positive knock-on effects, like increased souvenir purchases. So a better experience can have a ripple effect.
Absolutely. A well-designed experience can benefit everyone. So here's a final thought for our listeners. Think beyond tourism. Think about other areas of life where a similar focus on process and user needs could make a huge difference. Like, how could we apply these principles to education, healthcare, even just navigating everyday tasks? It's really about understanding how people interact with information and then designing systems that support those interactions in a meaningful way.
It's about making things easier, more intuitive, more enjoyable. And that's something we could all benefit from, right?
Absolutely. On that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
See you next time.